Have you ever woken up one morning, looked in the mirror, and thought, who even is this person? Not because you've aged, not because life knocked you down, but because somewhere between your 20s and your 40s, the rules you'd been quietly living by suddenly stopped making sense. The strategies that kept you going, the habits that felt safe, the walls you'd carefully built around yourself, all of it starts to crack. And if you're an INFJ or an INTJ, that cracking is louder, deeper, and way more disorienting than most people realize. Today we're diving into the brutal, often painful, but ultimately necessary shift that INFJs and INTJs go through after the age of 40. This isn't a feel-good video. It's an honest one. So if you're ready to understand what's actually happening inside that brilliant, complex mind of yours, stay with me. The mask starts cracking. For most of their adult lives, INFJs and INTJs wear a version of themselves that the world can handle. INFJs soften their intensity to avoid overwhelming people. INTJs dial down their directness to stay employable, lovable, accepted. Both types spend decades doing this unconscious editing, cutting out the parts of themselves that feel too much, too strange, too deep for the average dinner conversation. But here's the thing about masks. They don't break all at once. They crack slowly. And after 40, the cracks get harder to ignore. You start noticing a kind of internal friction that wasn't there before. The version of you that shows up at social events feels performative. The career path you chose feels like someone else's decision. The relationships you've maintained out of loyalty start to feel hollow. You're not having a crisis. You're having a clarity. And for an INFJ or INTJ, that clarity can feel more terrifying than any problem you've ever solved. The loyalty trap finally loses its grip. Both INFJs and INTJs are deeply loyal, sometimes to a fault. They stay in friendships that expired years ago, hold on to jobs that stopped challenging them, maintain family ties that drain more than they give. Their sense of duty runs so deep it borders on self-punishment. After 40, something changes. It's not that you stop caring, you actually care more. But you stop confusing loyalty with self-erasure. You start asking questions you were too afraid to ask before. Is this relationship serving me? Am I staying out of love or out of fear? These aren't selfish questions. They're honest ones. And the answers will shake you. Because for most INFJs and INTJs, the answer is that they've been loyal to the wrong things for a very long time. The energy crisis no one warns you about. Being an INFJ or INTJ has always been exhausting. You process everything more deeply than most people around you. You notice subtext, feel the emotional weight in rooms, hold complexity that others gloss over. And for decades, you've been doing this on sheer willpower. After 40, the body sends a bill. The social events you used to push through now cost 3 days of recovery. The mental projects you once juggled effortlessly feel like carrying boulders uphill. This isn't weakness. This is the nervous system demanding to be respected. The post-40 energy shift is an invitation to stop spending yourself on things that don't matter and start being ruthlessly intentional about what gets your attention. The question is whether you'll accept that gracefully or fight it until you burn out completely. Friendships start speaking a different language. One of the most unexpected parts of hitting 40 as an INFJ or INTJ is what happens to your social world. And honestly, it's a mixed bag. You've spent your whole life feeling like an outsider, always translating your inner experience into a language that other people can only vaguely understand. By 40, many INFJs and INTJs have quietly given up on trying to fit into social circles that never quite worked for them in the first place. But here's the twist. Instead of feeling lonely about it, a lot of them feel relieved. The pretending gets old. The small talk, the social performances, the effort of being around people who just don't get it. After 40, many INFJs and INTJs simply stop tolerating it. They'd rather have one genuine, deep, honest connection than 100 shallow ones. The brutal part? Some of the relationships they've maintained for years start to fall away. Friendships built on shared circumstances, work, school, mutual obligation, suddenly don't have enough glue to hold them together anymore. And that can sting, even when letting go is the right call. The shadow finally demands to be seen. In Jungian psychology, the shadow is the part of your personality you've pushed into the unconscious because it didn't feel acceptable. For INFJs, the shadow often contains anger, ambition, and the desire for power, things that felt incompatible with their identity as empathetic, gentle helpers. For INTJs, the shadow usually carries vulnerability, emotional need, and a deep fear of being seen as soft. After 40, the shadow stops waiting patiently. It starts knocking loudly. For INFJs, this might look like a sudden surge of anger they've never expressed before. Like finally saying the thing they've been swallowing for decades. Like choosing themselves in a situation where they would have previously sacrificed everything for someone else's comfort. For INTJs, it might look like an unexpected emotional reckoning. Like suddenly caring deeply about connection in a way they previously dismissed as weakness. Like reaching out after years of proud isolation and realizing, genuinely, uncomfortably, that they need people. This is the individuation process at work. And while it's brutal, it's the beginning of becoming whole. For the first time in their lives, INFJs and INTJs aren't just playing to their strengths. They're integrating their blind spots. And that's where real power comes from. Relationships get brutally honest. Nothing sorts your relationships quite like turning 40 as an INFJ or INTJ. By this point, you've accumulated years of evidence. You know who shows up. You know who drains you. You know which friendships are reciprocal and which ones are one-sided arrangements you've been quietly maintaining out of habit. Before 40, you might have kept those arrangements alive because you believed in people's potential, because you hoped things would change. But after 40, you start choosing reality over potential. You start honoring what is, not what could be. For INFJs, this often looks like the door slam, but a quieter, more intentional version of it. Not out of hurt, but out of wisdom. They don't just shut people out. They simply stop opening the door to people who've never earned it. For INTJs, the shift looks slightly different. The INTJ who once tolerated draining relationships for social reasons becomes genuinely selective. Not cold, selective. And the romantic dimension shifts too. INTJs who spent years keeping emotional intimacy at arm's length begin to feel a pull toward real connection that surprises even them. They start understanding that their mind, as formidable as it is, was never meant to carry them through life alone. The career that made sense at 25. For INTJs, the career reckoning hits like an earthquake. They arrive at 40 with exactly what they planned for and feel hollow inside it. Like climbing a mountain and realizing it wasn't the mountain they actually wanted to climb. INFJs face their own version. They chose helping professions because they needed to contribute. But by 40, many are burned out from giving everything to their work at the expense of themselves. The calling starts to feel like a cage. The question for both types stops being, how do I get higher? And becomes, is this ladder even leaning against the right wall? Both types go through a professional reinvention after 40 that looks chaotic from the outside but makes complete sense from within, because they finally have the clarity to demand something more honest from their working lives. The gift hidden inside the brutal shift. Here's what doesn't get said enough. This shift is not a tragedy. It feels like one, sometimes. It demands that you release versions of yourself you've been holding onto for decades. But the other side, the side you reach when you stop resisting and start integrating, is extraordinary. The INFJ who comes through this reckoning with their shadow integrated, their intuition trusted, and their energy protected is one of the most powerful forces in any room they enter. Not because they're loud, but because they are finally, fully themselves. And there's nothing more formidable than a person who has stopped apologizing for who they are. The INTJ who walks through this fire doesn't become soft, they become whole. They keep the analytical brilliance, but they add emotional depth. They keep the ambition, but they pair it with self-awareness. They stop being a high-performing machine and become a fully realized human being. The shift is brutal. The gift is real. And the only way to reach the gift is to go through the shift, not around it. Conclusion. If you're an INFJ or INTJ somewhere in your 30s or 40s and something inside you feels like it's quietly falling apart, hear this: you're not broken. You're not losing it. You're not failing. You're shifting. The relationships that are changing, the career questions that won't go away, the emotions suddenly harder to suppress. All of that is your inner world telling you the version of yourself you've been performing is no longer the whole story. This shift is not a curse. It's an invitation to stop running the old program, to stop being what everyone else needed you to be, to finally, truly become yourself. That process is uncomfortable. It keeps you up at 2 in the morning asking questions without easy answers. But the people who go through it and come out the other side don't just survive. They finally start to live.